Hi. So we're going to start reading this pretty wonderful book. And this is the book that we're going to be reading together for the rest of the year. It's our second half, like Island of the Blue Dolphins was our first half of the year, and this is our second half of the year. This book is called Esperanza Rising. And sorry, we have a we have a tiny hairy dog that's joining us. So this book takes place partly in Mexico, and it takes place partly in California. Mexico, during the time of this story, was a very difficult place to live unless you were a wealthy person. Mexico had been divided up into several large land grants, and the land was owned by wealthy families. And so if you were in a wealthy family, you would have a large chunk of land. You would also have a lot of poor people or peasants that would work for you on your land, that would do all of the farming for you on your land. And so if you were one of those poor people, there was never a chance for you to own your own land or to get ahead or to be successful in your own way. Instead, you would have to continue for the rest of your life working on someone else's land. There was not a lot of opportunity. So during the time of this story takes place shortly after the Mexican Revolution. And during the Mexican Revolution and for several years after the Revolution, lots of people were leaving Mexico to move to the United States because Mexico was really unstable and it was kind of an unsafe place to live. There were bands of people that were roaming through Mexico, bandits, and you could easily be robbed or attacked. And so it was kind of a dangerous, super dangerous place. That being said, in the early 1930s, late 1920s, the United States was also not a great place to be living. We were in the middle of a Great Depression where 1 out of every 4 people was unemployed. And a lot of people that lived in the Great Plains had lost their farms in a weather event called the Dust Bowl, where their crops had turned to dust. And so this story kind of takes place in this family leaves Mexico at a really difficult time, and they come to the United States at an equally difficult time. And they experience a lot of hardship in Mexico, and then they experience equal amounts of hardship when they move to the United States. It's a beautifully written story. I think you're really going to like it. It's very well written, has really interesting characters. And I want you, as we're reading it, to really be listening to the language as we're reading it, because it really has beautiful language. It's beautifully written. And the way the characters speak and the connection to the land that the characters feel, it's a book that feels uniquely Californian. Just like Island of the Blue Dolphins is uniquely Californian as well. We learned all about Corona, native Californian, and we learned about California landscape and elephant seals and abalone, animals that are native to California. This book also has a connection to the land and to agriculture. And since we live in a part of California where agriculture is very important, this feels like a particularly relevant book for us to read. I think you're going to have to go because you're distracting me. Okay. All right. So that being said, we are going to get started. And so this book starts out with a Mexican proverb, actually 2 Mexican proverbs The first one says, I don't know if I can read this in Spanish or if you'll be just horrified by my terrible Spanish. Aquel que hoy se que se levantará mañana. And that means he who falls today may rise tomorrow. So that's a pretty awesome proverb. Hey, you might be down today, but then tomorrow things might get better for you, right? And that's kind of goes with the title of Esperanza Rising. Things are not going to be going well for Esperanza, but we're going to watch her life change. We're going to watch her fortunes change. Es más rico el rico cuando empobrece que el pobre cuando enriquece. That is my terrible Spanish, and what that means in English is the rich person is richer when he becomes poor than the poor person when he becomes rich. So think about that. The rich person is richer when he becomes poor. Sometimes rich people don't understand. They don't have the life experiences and the difficulties and the challenges that poor people might have. And so this is saying that if you're a rich person, you feel richer once you become poor because you have more experience than the poor person when he becomes rich. Right? If you're a poor person and you become rich, then your life is made a lot easier, right? So that's a pretty awesome proverb. All right, so this story takes place in Aguas Calientes, Mexico, and it takes place in 1924. Our land is alive, Esperanza, said Papa, taking her small hand as they walked through the gentle slopes of the vineyard. Leafy green vines draped the arbors and the grapes were ready to drop. Esperanza was 6 years old and loved to walk with her papa through the winding rows, gazing up at him and watching his eyes dance with love for the land. This whole valley breathes and lives, he said, sweeping his arm toward the distant mountains that guarded them. It gives us the grapes and then they welcome us. He gently touched a wild tendril that reached into a row as if it had been waiting to shake his hand. He picked up a handful of earth and studied it. Did you know that when you lie down on the land, you can feel it breathe? That you can feel its heart beating? Papi, I want to feel it now, she said. Come. They walked to the end of the row, where the incline of the land formed a grassy swell. Papa lay down on his stomach and looked up at her, patting the ground next to him. Esperanza smoothed her dress and knelt down. Then, like a caterpillar, she slowly inched flat next to him, their faces looking at each other. The warm sun pressed on one of Esperanza's cheeks and the warm earth on the other. She giggled. Shh, he said. You can only feel the earth's heartbeat when you are still and quiet. She swallowed her laughter and after a moment said, I can't hear it, papi. Aguantante tantito y la fruta caerá en tu mano, he said. Wait a little while and the fruit will fall into your hand. You must be patient, Esperanza. She waited and lay silent, watching Papa's eyes, and then she felt it, softly at first, a gentle thumping, then stronger, a resounding thud, thud, thud against her body. She could hear it too, the beat rushing in her ears. Shoop, shoop, shoop. She stared at Papa, not wanting to say a word, not wanting to lose the sound, not wanting to forget the feel of the heart of the valley. She pressed closer to the ground until her body was breathing with the earth's, and then with Papa's, the three hearts beating together. She smiled at Papa, not needing to talk, her eyes saying everything, and his smile answered hers, telling her that he knew she had felt it. All right, so we will stop right there. That's just the introduction to the book. The way this book is organized is a little bit like Little House in the Big Woods. Little House in the Big Woods is organized by season, right? And we learn all about the land during different seasons. In this book, we're going to be learning about agriculture in different seasons. So each chapter is named after something that grows during that particular season. And because this story takes place in Mexico and in California, each one of the chapters is named after an agricultural product that grows at a specific time of the year. So Esperanza's family owns a vineyard. So they grow grapes in Mexico. And so the first chapter of the story is going to be called Las Uvas, which is the grapes. And then we're going to move through each chapter and we're going to learn about, each chapter is going to be about a different agricultural product. So we're going to learn a little bit about grapes and about harvesting grapes. And then we're going to move through different other things that grow with each chapter. And one entire year is going to pass and we're going to circle back to Las Uvas. We will circle back to the grapes. And what's really awesome is that because every chapter is named after an agricultural product, and that product is going to play a role in that particular chapter. So it helps you to remember things from the book. You'll be reading the chapter about mangoes and then you'll go, oh yeah, that's right. That's mangoes were in that part of the story. And this is what happened with the mangoes. So in some ways, it's really easy to remember events that happen in this story because of all of the agricultural products that help you to remind you about each chapter. So we will stop right there with the introduction. And when we come back, we're going to read the next chapter. We might just be reading half of the next chapter. I seem to remember that last year I chopped them in half when we went out on quarantine because they're kind of long chapters. All right. So we will probably be reading the first half of Las Uvas. All right. Thank you for joining me.